self-help books really change your life, or are they preying, taking cash from the vulnerable? Well, I'm going to declare a self-interest in this because just before Derek got sick, I started writing a book, got a publishing deal for a book that was all about well-being based on things I'd learnt. And it was going to be called Good Morning Life, How to Wake Up Every Day and Smile. It's still going ahead, I'm still writing it, but I'm going to be including, obviously, different insight that's happened to me along the way. But I find that there are books that are very helpful. And we're joined now by a psychotherapist and best-selling author of the brilliant 10 Times Happier. That's Owen O'Kane. Really, really good book. And he says books generally give people techniques to cope. And we're also joined by Sheila Ferguson from the soul music group 3 Degrees. We love Sheila, who says she's never read a self-help book and doesn't intend to. Sheila, having said all that before about my position, there are self-help books, I think, which aren't helpful, aren't there? And you have had a very successful life and never read one.
Yes, but I had a very rough childhood. When you see your mother taken away when you're 5 years old because you've called the police in a straitjacket and she's gone to a mental institution, and you're then shunted around from relative to relative, from school to school. You have to fit in. You have to stay an A student. You have to be on top of your game. And all my life, all I wanted to do was be a psychologist to understand the workings of the mind. Now, growing up the way I did and coming from where I come from, self-help to me is just that. You help yourself. If I hadn't helped myself stay straight and on the straight and narrow, in 1974, right now, When Will I See You Again was #1 in England. So I've come on my journey, but I tend to self-motivate. In other words, I know that there's not going to be any show business or I won't be on stage till at least, I think, next spring. So that's a year off. I know I should be working out. I don't get that hour and a half on stage to exercise and to move all the muscles that I'm used to moving, but I'm not doing it. I'm taking a break. So I can motivate myself. I can do Pilates, I can do yoga, I can do whatever I choose to do. I choose not to do anything. That's on me. Sheila, self-help means helping yourself.
Sheila, that's great. And, you obviously have been blessed with a great career. You're a strong character. You've had a tough childhood. That's evidently made you stronger. But we're all individuals, and someone may well have gone through everything that you've gone through and not been able to cope, and perhaps would have gone to a self-help book to make them stronger, though.
I think if they have gone through what I've gone through, then perhaps they need some kind of clinical help. All knowledge is good, don't get me wrong. I have nothing against self-help books for people if they work for them. They just wouldn't work for me because it has to come from inside. When you come out of the ghetto, you have to make yourself. When you come bust from a black neighborhood to a white neighborhood, you have to fit in with all those kids, and you have to adapt. Not being violent, not being vulgar or crass, but you've got to make yourself. You've got to make yourself. I can't get that from a book. I can get that from Sheila.
Well, Owen, one of the things I think that good self-help books do is that they're another resource for helping some people find those tools if they can't access it as well as Sheila did from within themselves for motivation. Sometimes you can read a book and most of it just like, oh, that's not me. But other times there'll be just something in it which you think, oh, OK, that's helped something fall into place.
Yeah, and it's a really good point. I mean, it's incredible that Sheila has all of that motivation and she can find that and drive her life forward the way she's done. But unfortunately, for a lot of people, they don't have that initial motivation and they need support finding it. So when I sit down to write a self-help book as a clinician and as a psychotherapist, my thought is, how can I reach people? Because there are a lot of people out there who can't access support. They can't afford therapy. They need help and support. So as a clinician, when I write a book, I can give people tools and tips that will move them forward. But I think for me, more importantly, what I hope to deliver is hope. Because I think when people have even a small degree of hope, then that enables them to find strength. And I think that's what bothers me about the self-help market. People can very often slag it off, but actually there's some brilliant stuff out there, some really good material.
Are you becoming busier? Obviously, it's been really tough over the last few months with the pandemic. And I understand that more people are looking towards self-help books to try and pick them up.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the busiest I've been in a long time. I mean, I think obviously a lot of people are really struggling at the moment. So, yeah, I don't remember my career ever been this busy.
Sheila, where do you turn if you need a boost? Alex was saying that he doesn't read self-help books. You find seeing people's inspirational stories, which often could be at the core of a self-help book.
It's similar to Sheila, actually.
To Sheila.
And I think that there are some parallels in, my upbringing and perhaps being the only person of colour at university and having to find your way, being one of the only people of colour walking into a newsroom as well.
Do you think maybe that's because the self-help books didn't speak to you visually? You didn't see them written by people that you could relate to?
Yeah, perhaps, but I think one of the main things is that just as an individual, and I really respect that there are so many different points of view on this and everyone responds to motivation in different ways, they wouldn't help me because I respond to seeing people do things and being inspired that way.
Sheila, I mean, that's interesting. Is that what touches you? Because I'm wondering if you should be writing a self-help book, quite frankly, with the tools that you used.
Well, I'm writing, but I can't go into what I'm writing. I'm doing a lot of writing. But I find that if I get idle, I need a project, then I find a project. If I feel that if someone needs a self-help book, they already know the problem. So if you know the problem and it's clinical, you get clinical help. If you need psychological help, Sorry?
I wouldn't agree with that. I wouldn't agree with you on that because very often people don't know what the problem is. And I think that is the point, particularly when clinicians get involved in this world, it's helping people identify what they might be struggling with. And I think it's too broad to assume that people know what the problem is. Very often they don't.
I'm talking about the self-help books that you see on the shelves that are, to me, fatuous. They're just a way to make money, quite frankly. They're a soft paperback. I'm not talking about coming from a psychological point of view like you are. I'm talking about just the self-help books that people go home and read, and how to lose weight or how to get a job or how to do this. You know there's a problem, then you need to directly solve and address that problem. That's my point.
I mean, Sheila, do you think that lots of people read self-help books and that's all they do? They just read them? Because if you're going to read them, you have to action them, don't you, for them to work?
Well, yeah, it's as you said, Alex, it's about action. If you can read every book in the library, but if you don't act on it, you're still getting nowhere. It's about action. It's about positive mental attitude. I've been up watching the Democratic convention all night, had a few hours sleep and pasted my face. That's because it's my job and I have to do it. I'm not complaining, but I'm not a self-help book type reader, and I think if people can learn from my life story, that's one thing. But I wouldn't write a self-help book to try to pontificate towards someone else, to tell them this is what you should do and this is what you do. I'm not a psychologist. Singing took me another direction. So I have to finish all the psychology.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a possibility that your story could really influence and motivate people. You've had a tough past. So, well,
that's different than a self-help book.
Why is it
Well,
different?
I think, to be honest, it's a wide category, isn't it? And more recent books are like that. It's like, this is what I've learned, this is what for me, and trying to distill down tools and techniques that work for anybody. We had a lot of people get in touch. Kirsty says, I read a book called The Naked Mind by Annie Grace, and it led me to being sober for 7.5 months. It's changed my life. Tracy said, Alan Carr's The Easy Way to Stop Smoking meant I never touched a cigarette since 10 years ago. And Sarah on Twitter says, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffers came along at the right moment for me. My marriage had broken down, my dad had died. I felt trapped. That was 21 years ago. And it helped give me the confidence to go travelling and change my life. Lots of other people saying absolute nonsense and praise on the vulnerable. We have been running, Sheila, we have been running a Twitter poll this morning whether you believe self-help books can work. 35% say yes, while 65% say no.